All right, let's get going. So, good morning. Monday morning at 11 a.m. Always a fun time to give a talk. I hope everybody has gotten coffee and is slightly more awake now. We're going to have a little bit of fun this morning. I'm going to do this relatively quickly. I can usually speak for hours, but I've got 30 minutes, so I'm going to try to keep it to that. And so we're going to be talking about interactive streaming and the future of esports. This is probably, in my opinion, the most exciting part of the game industry these days. I'm going to start with a brief overview of my background. So I used to work in finance and consulting, and then about a decade closer ago, I started working for Square Enix Holdings, where I was director of business development. I worked for their CEO. I built Shinra Technologies, which was their cloud gaming system. And then a couple years back, I started this new company, Genvid, with a number of my former colleagues. I've been in the game industry for a while. My name is Genvid. Some fun photos from my time at Square, with Kojima-san, with Tim Sweeney, and others over close to a decade in the industry. I'll speak very briefly about Genvid, but I want to move fairly fast into the main topic on live streaming and esports. So Genvid's booth is right over there. I pointed out again at the end because it's so far away. Latin, gen means birth, vid means view, so the name means a birth of a new form of viewing. Founded in 2016 by game industry veterans, 4 of us, decades of experience. We've got offices here in Montreal. We've got 23, close to 25 people. New York, Los Angeles, and Tokyo these days. And we have been backed by some pretty cool investors, but I'm not going to talk too much about the company right now. I'm going to move into our main vision on live streaming and esports. Core thesis that we're operating on. Games are becoming more like media, and media is becoming more like games, and they meet at the middle at interactive streaming. What is esports? Esports is the watching of video games. When you watch and you don't interact, that is media. When you watch a Twitch stream, that is media. When you watch an esport event, that is media. And every single media company that I speak with, and I speak with a lot of them these days, Hollywood studios, sports manufacturers, television broadcasters, every single one of them says, well, interactivity is the future of our industry. And it's funny because we've been doing interactivity in games now for 40 plus years. But the more that media pushes into interactivity and the more that games pushes into media, what you find is that they meet in the middle in this funny area called interactive streaming. So what does it mean to have an interactive stream? What does it mean for esports? That's the core part of the talk today. If you look at the video game industry today, $100 billion industry, you see a very strong focus on the player. Developers, we in the industry today, focus our revenues on monetizing play. What's interesting is media focuses on monetizing view. Esports is the first wave of developers monetizing their viewers. We're going to go into this in a moment, but when you look at Overwatch League, when you look at what Riot Games does, when they generate their world's broadcast and they sell sponsorships against that, they sell advertising against that, they make live streaming deals with Twitch. We're going to go into all of this today. They're starting to monetize not the player base necessarily, but the people watching. It is a new revenue stream around viewers. And this is going to grow and grow and grow. If you look at forecasts for interactive media, which is to say esports, video content, everything that we see on YouTube, you see that there is massive growth expected, and in fact already there in the industry today. The question is, how do we as game developers capture that? In other words, when somebody buys Assassin's Creed and streams that to Twitch today, Ubisoft doesn't really make money off of that stream. Twitch can make money if they sell advertising against it. The partner can make money if they're partnered on Twitch. But a lot of the ecosystem around live streaming today has been built up around other people monetizing video content in games. Billions of dollars in value. Amazon, Google, Facebook, and the others have been built around monetizing game video. The game developers haven't participated monetarily in those streams yet. And so when we look at the growth of the ecosystem, the big question for us as game developers are we going to be part of that value chain? If so, how, where, and when? What tools do we need to do so? But before we get into that, let's take a look at what esports is today, what it was in the past, and how that path is going to go forward. So if you look at the rise of esports in 2018, incredible production values, massive viewership, millions of concurrent viewers for E-League, for Counter-Strike Majors, for Overwatch League, for League of Legends, and more. There is a lot of money being invested into this ecosystem, but it's very funny because if you go back in history, where did the viewing of games start? I would argue that it actually started in 1970s and 80s in Japan in arcades when people would just crowd around and watch others play. That was the birth of people watching game viewership. In the 80s and 90s, you had LAN parties. You had people getting together, watching competitive games. And interestingly enough, in 2001 and 2, you see the birth of ESL and MLG almost within a year of each other. But if you think about competitive gaming, in other words, the rise of these esport companies 15 years ago, how would you get access to watching this before people had broadband, before people had really good live streaming platforms? A lot of times when I would go to MLG's website 12, 14 years ago, I would get clips of past events that were happening. And what was interesting was that esports were typically defined as competitive gaming rather than watching games, but games by their nature are competitive. In other words, you compete when you play a game. That is the whole purpose of interactivity. So what has changed between 2002 esports and 2018 esports? Well, that's largely the growth of live streaming. In other words, you had niche audiences come together about a decade ago and snowball into massive viewership of streams. You had audiences who were fans of Counter-Strike, were fans of League of Legends 6, 7, 8 years ago, saying, you know what, I'm so passionate about this product that I want to watch other people who are skilled at it play. I'm not just going to sit there and play myself, I'm actually going to be entertained by others. And live streaming platforms began to enable the growth of very large stream viewership. And that resulted in eventually brands coming in. Because what happens in any sport, baseball, football, etc., when you start with core play and you transition into people interested in that core play, not just playing themselves but actually watching, you start to have lots of eyeballs. Who likes lots of eyeballs? Advertisers. And so the moment that advertisers enter into the ecosystem, it begins to be monetized, and you start to see major brands bringing sponsorships. And from there, acquisition and investment. Billions of dollars in it, because what they see is the start of, if you go back a few slides, that growth of that ecosystem from $1 billion to $2 billion to, in a few years, $45 billion. All of this is part of a story of growth, of transitioning our game industry, not just about being monetizing players, but also to seeing the larger ecosystem around game content, viewing, interacting with that content as being the future of potential. And again, I return to where do we, as developers, participate in this? And the start of it is being led by big publishers because they've got lots of eyeballs. So they bring big broadcast deals, they bring money, right? The Overwatch League, the acquisition of MLG by Activision Blizzard. You see the investments that Riot has made into the space. You see the Disney acquisition of BAMTech. All of this plays into basically a funnel of new revenues. The question is, again, are these new revenues going to move beyond broadcast? Are they going to move beyond large publishers? Are they going to move into something different from the ecosystem? And my argument for the future of all of this live streaming is yes, it's going to be a fundamental transformation. I want to return to the definition of esports. A lot of people define it as competitive gaming. I don't define it that way. As I mentioned, all of gaming is inherently competitive, whether you're competing against an AI, whether you're competing against other players. Games by their nature are competitive. And so viewing is what makes an esport, not just playing a game. Building a business around esports requires monetizing that viewership. It is not an esport unless you are actually able to take an audience and think, how do I make this into a business? Because if you're not monetizing that audience, then it's not a business. It's not really an esport. It's just people hanging around and watching a game. Today, it's mostly monetized by brands, and brands, of course, want large audiences. So how do we maximize that audience as game developers? The question for the industry when it comes to maximizing audience has to start with market growth. Today, the esports market in total is between $1 billion to $2 billion worldwide. The game industry itself is a $100 billion market. So esports, as much as it's getting a lot of talk and a lot of potential, is still just 1 to 2% of our industry. By the way, there's a major failure in the way that people think about esports today because many people consider it to be some sort of separate industry. It is not. It is a part of the game industry. It is a new revenue stream for the game industry. We should always think of it as something inherent to what we do as content creators, not something separate from it. As we think about that question of how do we monetize viewership, what does it mean to grow esports, we have to think about the problem of individual monetization. If you look at sports which has excelled at this, the NBA monetizes at $20 a viewer. NFL monetizes at $60 a viewer. They sell tickets, they sell jerseys, they sell broadcast rights. Esports, we're expecting $6 a viewer right now, a fraction of that. How do we increase this? How do we grow the overall pie? What does it mean to create a new market? We have to start by asking, what is the problem today? And the problem is that we still think about the audience in terms of players. In other words, we still think of esports as a way to market our game, and that the primary audience is players rather than viewers as some sort of core aspect, core component of what it is that we do. When you look at a lot of the smaller developers and a lot of the smaller publishers investing into this space, they're saying, we're going to do an esport event. Nintendo is infamous for this. At the start, the launch of our product, to drum up interest so that we could sell more product. We're not actually going to try to monetize that. We're not going to try to grow that revenue base. But that's not where this is all going. And if we only focus on how do we market to players, we're not going to actually maximize the potential of the audience. So we have to solve this problem. Because where esports goes is, it is the first wave of monetizing viewership. It is the start of something. It is not the end goal of it. It is the start of a fundamental transformation of the industry, saying there is an entire additional revenue pillar here. And I'm going to get into that now. When we talk about the focus on the player, we have to talk about viewership. If you watch the vast majority of games today on Twitch and YouTube, you are watching it from a player camera. You do not watch baseball from the perspective of a GoPro camera strapped to the back of a player. If you tried to do that, you would probably vomit because it would not be a very good experience. It would be shaky and janky, but that's how we monetize and maximize viewership today. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be doing what sports has learned, which is how do we create a compelling experience around this? What does it mean to actually create a broadcast where people who don't necessarily play the game or who are not experts in the game can actually meaningfully participate in it and say, this is entertaining to me. This is exciting to watch. I don't play baseball. I like going to baseball games. I don't understand the rules of football, but I can appreciate the Super Bowl. What does that mean to create experiences around that? Because as the rights owners, as the owners of the intellectual property of games, we have the ability to maximize this potential. We have the ability to monetize our game products, and we're not doing that. And it has to start with thinking about the spectator experience from the ground up. If you look at viewership today, it is a fundamentally underserved market. Because we have always focused on the player, we have not really thought about what does it mean to create an interesting experience for viewers? How should we monetize them? We've started with ads. But the moment you start to have interactivity back into the stream, which is what we're good at, right? As game creators, we are good at creating interactive experiences. We can allow for viewers to cheer. We can allow for viewers to impact our streams. We can allow for viewers to get and capture data. We can turn them not just into viewership, but into participants of what they're watching. And we can begin to monetize it not just as the media industry is limited, because I can't really maximize my viewership of a regular TV show other than selling ads against it or selling it on a subscription basis. But I can start to maximize my experience for interactivity through all sorts of other game-like experiences, and I'll go into that in a moment. We have to think about that because that's going to result in new revenue streams for us. There is a fundamental gap in the way in which we create interactive entertainment for our audiences. Because we have focused on players, we have missed the participant experience that I'm speaking about. If you look at the physical market, the majority of revenue is actually generated through broadcast rights. How big is the business selling baseballs to players? How big is the business selling football to players? Relatively small compared to the business, the billions of dollars generated by CBC, NBC, ABC, ESPN, Fox Sports, etc. worldwide for this. FIFA broadcast rights are worth a lot more than selling FIFA balls to players. And so the digital ecosystem goes material value in player, even more material value in participant. So in the stadium experience, drawing people to the stadium, selling them jerseys, selling them tickets, selling the entire experience around the content, and then finally, all of those billions of viewers worldwide. And in the digital ecosystem today, the majority of value is actually in play. It's in selling stuff to players. And we are leaving material money on the table in the watching experience because we've just returned it to the same player viewing problem that I said. We are not actually creating content in a way that is maximizing that audience. And most importantly, nobody is looking at the digital stadium experience and saying, how can we monetize this? How can we create that same experience of being at a stadium digitally? What does it mean to have viewer cheering? What does it mean to have viewer participation in a premium experience that is not just playing the game? So this is a massive gap. And what's amazing is if you look at it from the perspective of a game developer, you have significant opportunity here to maximize this value. Today you have players, but that is a smaller market relative to the number of people who can watch your game. I think more people watch Red Dead Redemption 2 than necessarily play it, right? Because there are 100 million viewers on Twitch every single month, right? But there are what, 10 million copies being sold of the game? That's 10x difference. So if you look at spectators as an opportunity, and most importantly, you look at interactivity back into your game as an opportunity to monetize it and maximize that value, you will see, going back to the core thesis, significant growth in this market. We have to start thinking about rich experiences against it. If you go to our booth later, we'll show you some of the interactivity that we've been building. But you have to think about additional camera perspectives. Where is the best camera for viewers? You have to think about the interactivity because your game has a rich treasure trove of data in it. You can actually allow people through your streams to get access to that data, to click and interact with it as though they were players. And you can embed authentic content into it. We have the ability, because we have the data in every frame that we render, to mark information, to mark areas of the map that we can put dynamic advertisements against, that we could put hidden walls and experiences against for our viewers to make it more entertaining. In football, that simple yellow line was a revolution. In games, we have all of the data that we need to make something radically beyond the yellow line. What does that mean? That's a lot of the thinking that we've been doing at our company every single day. And the moment that you start to have interactivity back into it, that you can allow people to cheer, that you can allow people to actually interact. In one of our products, we've got a kill button that allows the viewers to actually kill the player in real time if the player doesn't do a real good job. It's like the old school Roman Colosseum, going like that. At that moment, when I as a viewer can cheer for them, kill them, do all sorts of interactions, am I a viewer anymore? I'm not really a player in this product. I'm something fundamentally different. There was always this bifurcation. I can play or I can view. I have a controller in my hand or I can simply watch. We're game creators. We've got that data in our game. We should drive interactivity back into it. This is what it means to create a new form of media. And the moment that you have that bifurcation broken, you can engage how you want. We think about it in terms of multiple levels of engagement. Do I want to just play and sit back? Do I want to cheer? Do I want to get data on this game? Do I want to interact more deeply into this game? We'll show you some examples of products later at the booth if you want, but we've been thinking about this for 3 years now. So there are 3 kind of tiers to these levels of engagement. The base is just data, is information. When you watch a baseball game, we've got a camera doing tracking that tells you the speed of the ball. That's about all we know. When you render a baseball game in a video game, we know everything in that scene. We know the height of the pitcher. We know the exact trajectory of the ball. We know the wind speed because it was all calculated in our physics engine. We have access to this data. We have access to the data that they only dream of in sports. We can do incredible experiences over these streams by allowing viewers to have access to this data. Why don't we? Customization. The moment you have that data and you can target individual viewers because everything is digital, you can start to allow different experiences. We've got the team from A1 Games here sitting at the front. We've got their game streaming over at our booth. This is an awesome fighting game just out on the PlayStation 4. In their stream, they allow the viewer to turn on the actual inputs coming from the players and the real-time hitboxes live over Twitch. So as a viewer, you can see the hitboxes that you normally would never have access to inside of the game itself. You can customize your experience as a viewer, again, because we have that data. We should make it accessible. Go check it out later. It's awesome. The final tier is influence. How do we create an experience that allows the viewers to go step beyond just watching? We have a product that is being demonstrated also at our booth called Chicken. It's a kids game. They've created an arena mode using our tech where the viewers can clap and cheer, and those cheers affect the AI that are happening there inside of the game itself. So that the more viewers are cheering, the more that they're interacting, the more the AI is actually affected and influenced by what's happening from the viewers. I'm going to start to wrap up here, but if you look at where all of this is going, if you look at the trend toward cloud gaming, this is going to hit a sort of singularity. Because low latency streaming, that's what cloud gaming is. Every broadcast platform is driving toward this. 2 years ago, YouTube latency was 20 seconds. Twitch latency was 30 seconds. About a year and a half ago, Twitch started doing ultra low latency, pushed it down from 10 seconds to close to 3 seconds. Twitch these days also have low latency, 3 seconds. Mixer is at below 1 second. I partner with all of the different live streaming platforms. I partner with all of the CDNs. You're going to see below 1 second latency on broadcast. At that point in time, the only thing that you can't do as a viewer is camera control because you need sub 30 milliseconds for that. That's literally cloud gaming. But other than that, every kind of interaction that you can imagine, you can do live over a stream. There's not going to be a difference between player and viewer at that point in time. Server-side rendering. We render on the server so that you don't have to touch the game stream. This has gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. When I was doing cloud gaming 8 years ago, it cost us an arm and a leg. We had to create custom chips for this. That's what I was doing at Square Enix. These days, you've got grid servers, you've got G2s on Amazon, G3s. They're getting better and better. Not only that, but because you've got dedicated servers to render spectator modes, you can drive levels of quality that you can't drive on the local machines. You can have a much more beautiful spectator render than you could have on any other machine because you've got a dedicated server toward this. And then 5G. I don't really have good internet here at this conference. My 4G kind of sucks, but 5G is kind of fiber internet in your pocket. It is a gigabit of throughput. It is 10 milliseconds of round-trip network latency. When you've got that level of power in your pocket anywhere you go, just think about what's possible with this. the more you drive interactivity over these streams, the more what the game industry is starts to fundamentally change, which gets back to that first set of slides I showed you. Where are we going? Are we going to focus only on players, or are we going to become a new form of media? And that's going to expand the industry. I think that's where it is all going to become. So if we return to the opportunity, that digital stadium that we spoke about, those levels of engagement, if today the only opportunity I have as a game player is to buy a game for $60 or to watch it for free, the moment I have interactivity, we sold in September the Counter-Strike Premium Pass. We were charging $10 to a viewer to have all the camera perspectives, all sorts of rich interactivity live over Twitch for $10. So you could, in the past, buy Counter-Strike or watch it. But now you've got very rich interactivity that you can start to sell to viewers. You can start to do micro engagements where you can actually sell skins to viewers. You can start to sell the ability to engage and mess with the stream to viewers in real time. This is a massive audience potential. Because again, $60 or zero, you've got an entire willingness to pay curve that up until now you haven't been accessing. So if in the digital space, play has been the fundamentally largest ecosystem, in other words, monetizing players of Fortnite is bigger than monetizing viewers of Fortnite today, the potential for monetizing the participants, the cheers, the interactions back into it can be as big as play, if not bigger, when game products are built for this from the ground up. So finally, if you want to see what we're talking about, because these are not just ideas, we've been building it, the booth is literally right over there. We've got some cool stuff. We've got game developers who we've been working with. We've got interactive Counter-Strike, all sorts of games, stuff that we did with Epic with Unreal Tournament. It's incredibly cool. But I'm going to stop here, because I have talked for too long. And if you have any questions, I am happy to answer them. No pressure. Yes? Excellent question. So we've been thinking about this. What does it mean to have a stream built from the ground up for a long time? We're actually building a piece of content that we're not showcasing here on the floor today, but think about it like the 1980s movie The Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger, or Smash TV. What would it mean for 1 million people to interact with that program at the same time? What if you as a viewer could change your perspective to any player going through there, any enemy, as the dungeon master, set the traps, set the maze in real time, cheer for people, support people in real time? It's kind of like an interactive TV show. So at Thursdays at 8 o'clock, you would watch this, and as a viewer, be able to mess with the running man in real time, be able to try to set a trap to kill him, because that's what it was about, right? But in that case, there was only one broadcaster. Here, there's 1 million people trying to mess with it. Chicken, which we've got up here, is also another great example of it. You've got an arena mode with 2 AI that are competing with each other, and the viewers have to cheer, have to rally toward it. They can feed the chickens hamburgers and steaks to try to buff them and help them and support them. It's kind of like if your player was 1 million different people, how would you create that interactivity? Thank you. Yes? Yes, so we do have some of the Battle Royales integrating us right now. I unfortunately can't speak about their integrations, but yes. And so we actually work on all 3 tiers for that. So in tier number 1, the ability to click and interact with everything you see in the stream as though you have the game installed. So you can actually click on the players and get their data. You can click on the guns and learn about them. You can click on the map and see everything that's happening in real time live over the stream. Then as a viewer, customize all the information that you want to see. I want this part of the map. I don't want this part of the map. I want to watch from this angle of the map. I don't want to watch from this angle of the map. And then finally, the ability to influence. So voting for where the next drop is going to happen, voting for where the map should close, voting for where certain players should be dropped on this part or the other. But it's not just about voting. We actually see the ability to have cheering influence what's happening. So the players who get the most cheers, the players who get the most support, are actually the ones who get advantages in it, and if you're not entertaining, you lose. So we actually did one of these streams at the beginning of September. We worked with a VR developer in Japan, and they did a tournament with us September 5th. And this developer had likes and bombs. And so the teams with the most likes that were coming through this Twitch stream, they would appear on top of the player, and they would get all these likes. The casters went nuts for this. Became this entire other metagame. Why was this team getting more likes than the other one? Why were they playing better than the other one? Because up until now, the casters could only speak about, well, this player's playing well, but now they're getting real-time audience feedback on it. And then in the last 30 seconds of the match, the viewers could drop bombs directly on the players. So, is it an esport? Is it something completely different? I don't know. But if you didn't entertain them, bombs. And so that became this entire third meta that the chat went nuts about. And they were like, I love dropping bombs on this player because he's a jerk. So, I hope I answered your question, but suffice to say, yes, all three tiers for the Battle Royale are fascinating for us. Anything else? Yes. Yes. So that is a fundamental game design question. So the question is, what happens when the viewers start to bully the players? You've got to really think about game balance when it comes to this. How much power do you actually give to the viewership? What's interesting is that you can actually scale this in an interesting way, where instead of allowing 1,000 people to press bombs, you decide there's going to be a funnel of bombs. 1,000 people will press it, which is going to result in 5 bombs or 10 bombs, depending on the algorithm that we're generating. And in addition, once a player gets bombed enough times, we're not going to permit it more than that. And then we also have to think about game design balance here, because if you're breaking on one team and the other team's just, it's not fundamentally fair anymore, maybe every time there's a bomb, some sort of other support pops up for the other team, right? A bomb gets dropped on one team, special items get dropped for the other team, et cetera, et cetera. You can always design out of this, but we've never thought about that design from the ground up, which is where a lot of the challenges come from. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to wrap up because I think we're out of time now. Thank you all for coming. I hope that was useful ranting. And please come check out the booth.